Hi, and welcome to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. Today we're speaking with Jen Mark. Jen Mark is an athletic therapist, and Jen and I got to know each other through working with the Stouffville Spirit. She was the athletic therapist, and I was part of the broadcast team. And over the years of working with hockey and watching what happens on the ice, when I saw Anthony Stolarz go down in that game with the Leafs on Monday night, I knew that there was something wrong. And when you see him go over to the bench and start to throw up, you think, yeah, you've just had two really significant hits to the head. One was a puck that hit his mask, and those pucks are traveling at 90 miles an hour. And they really are, because my daughter was hit in the head by a puck, and she suffered a concussion that took her out of school for the last term of grade 12 in high school. And then then he got hit in the head again, but it was kind of an odd hit the way it made his head move, and that always gives us pause when we see that flicking motion of the head. So, Jen, what did you think of that hit?
Well, when we were talking a little bit earlier, sometimes big hits can be nothing, and sometimes little hits can cause a lot of damage depending on how the brain moves and the motion of his head and his neck. So sometimes I look at something and I think, ooh, and it's nothing. And sometimes I think nothing of it. And, an athlete will come up to me and say what they're feeling, or I'll talk to them and say, are you feeling this or this? And ask them a few pointed questions and then go from there.
Yeah. And I remember that when, in the past, and I'm talking 20 years ago, a concussion was something that, suck it up and get back on the ice. Suck it up and get back on the field. Mm-hmm. You're fine. No, you took some cleats to the head. You'll be fine. Just get up there. Shake it off. You can do it. Shake it off. And we know now that that's probably the worst thing you can do for a concussion, isn't it?
In the moment, the research is showing that the longer the athlete stays in the game, the longer it can take to recover. So even if it's not a full concussion, even if there's a brain event, as we sometimes say, you're getting hit in the head and maybe there's some movement, not enough to cause an actual injury, but it's probably worth having a rest to allow those nerves to settle. It's like when you almost roll your ankle and it's sore, but it's not swelling or anything. But, while you're out running and you decide to walk for a little bit, let it settle down, maybe you can run again. Sometimes that can happen with the brain. If it's only a hit, maybe we can take a bit of a break. So but if there's symptoms and we actually have a concussion, then we have to allow it to heal.
Okay. Let's talk about what a concussion is, because you're talking about movement of the brain. It's hard for me to picture the brain actually getting up and doing the cha-cha. So
yeah, it's not attached. It's not fixed in there. It's just fluid.
Really?
So that's the spinal fluid, and that's around our brain. So it's free floating. So when we move our head really quickly, sometimes it happens in whiplash, even if you're not even hitting something. And if the brain comes forward, it can bounce against the skull.
Huh, okay.
Yeah. And then a concussion really is just like a misfiring of the nerves. It's just like a miscommunication. So some of the nerves, like if it's your vagus nerve, it's one of the cranial nerves, that might make you throw up. If it's something that makes you lose consciousness, that could be something that would be a result of a concussion, or even just your eyes not feeling quite right. Sometimes people don't feel that their vision is as good, or they just don't feel like themselves. And those are usually the most common, the biggest signs.
Yeah, and it's pretty obvious now maybe it isn't as obvious, but when you're playing sports, you're more likely to have to deal with concussion. But concussion can happen from a family ski trip. It can happen tripping in the forest and falling.
Yeah, slip and fall on the ice. That happens lots when people fall back and they hit their head. And that's when you're saying about the definition of concussion, it's just like an interruption of all your systems. So is your balance disrupted? Is your vision disrupted? Is your taste or some of your movements disrupted? Your thought processes, your analytical thinking, all those things are concussion. And that's what we now know about concussions more than we did 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, is how to flush out where everyone's symptoms are. So someone might feel fine, but their balance is a little off. Or they might feel okay, but their vision is a little off. So think of kids in school that have to look at the teacher, look at their notes, look at the teacher, look at their notes, look at their computer. Sometimes when they have a concussion, they can't follow all of that because they can't move their head fast enough or they can't move their eyes. Sometimes the eyes go really slow. And if you think of that on the ice with hockey, you have to, the out players would have to look at the puck, look to see where they're going to go, look at the goalie, look back at the puck. That needs really fast eye movement.
Absolutely.
And if you have a concussion, sometimes you can't move your eyes that fast. So then it affects performance.
Well, when my daughter got hit with the puck at the Stouffville Spirit game, she was talking to a friend, and it's a good thing that someone yelled heads, and she turned and caught it in the forehead. Otherwise, it would have hit her in the temple, and I don't know if she'd be here today. But she said that months later, she couldn't go tubing at the cottage because any motion that whipped her out and went really fast, it's like, she said, it's like her head couldn't catch up with her eyes, and that it was a dizziness, but it's not a dizziness like regular dizziness. It's something completely different. And it was funny,
it's hard to describe until you really feel it.
Exactly.
Those are a lot of the symptoms of concussion where we don't know lots about, and it's hard for the athlete to say, this is how I'm feeling, especially to a coach or someone who doesn't know, if they just feel off. I just don't feel right. And you have to take that seriously because there's systems that aren't working. And then there's implications, whether they get hurt because they can't pay attention to their surroundings, or maybe it affects like school-aged kids, even into high school. If they can't keep up with their notes, if they can't study because it gives them headaches, they'll fall behind.
Yes, and they suffer socially as well because they're almost hesitant in the world around them. And
that's right.
My daughter finally talked to a basketball player friend of hers, and this girl had suffered 2 concussions from basketball, and she said, I know exactly what you mean. And then they had
a lot of schools are starting to do that now, of having support groups for just like anything else. If you've had a concussion, and having a group of athletes or any students around that to talk about how they feel, because there might be isolation in their family. They might feel isolated from the sport because maybe they're not going to go to practice. And so now what? Like you have someone who's used to going to practice 4, 5, 6 days a week, in the gym 3 days a week, and they're living and breathing their sport, and all of a sudden everything stops. So there's the psychological side of that. There's the depression side of that, whether it's from the concussion or just from injury. There's a lot of psychological aspects that come just from injury.
Now, what are some of the things that help to heal a concussion?
Time is one of the things. For sure. And then it's fleshing out the symptoms. So if you have a balance issue, then quite often we work on the balance, just like retraining the body, retraining the brain, almost like a reprogramming. Vision, there's a lot of different, that's vision is one of the biggest things that can go wrong with concussion. So there's a lot of exercises that a lot of therapists are doing to help retrain vision, to refocus the eyes, to follow an object, to see an object clearly and track it. So there's a lot that can be done that way, a lot of therapeutic exercises. But a lot of it is time. And then now the biggest thing that's changed in concussion recovery, back into activity so much sooner. We encourage the students to get back to school. We encourage them to do some form of exercise as long as it's tolerated. We don't want to make someone worse, but always that sub-threshold and maybe pushing a little bit is encouraged now. When before, we used to just shut them in a dark room and say, stay there till you feel better.
Well, the philosophy behind that, from what I learned when my daughter had her concussion, was that the brain needs to be quiet and heal. And I can see that for a little while. And, it was hard keeping her in her dark room with no screen time and
causes so much depression especially amongst teenagers and young kids. Yeah.
It was really hard for her. And that's what her doctor ended up saying. He said, now we're running that line between, is the depression of staying in a dark room by yourself outweighing the benefits? And so
that's right.
We slowly came back into, just don't be on your phone all day and do take it easy and that kind of thing. And I think it really worked. But now I understand that there are different protocols. But in the same sense, you're not putting the kid on the ice.
Exactly. Well, exactly. And we really encourage them to go out for a walk and do some things. If you have a dog, take the dog for a walk, and doing some light reading and things. Because if you think about that ankle injury that maybe you sustained, you have to retrain that ankle back. So, even knee surgeries, you think of knee replacements, people are back and they're off and they're getting them home right away, right?
Yeah.
Because the body heals so much better when it's in motion. So it's the same concept, but you got to stay sub-threshold. You don't have a knee replacement and then run a marathon.
No.
So you have a concussion, you have a brain injury, so you can work through the various stages to progressively build back to all systems go.
Okay. So we can leave the NHL alone because professional sports is a beast unto itself.
And we don't know the full story.
Right.
We don't know what the makeup was of what he's really dealing with. If there's something that was happening before, or it's
he could
too
have
hard
the flu. He could have had the stomach flu. No one knows. And they're not going to say in playoffs because that gives the other team some advantage knowing that he's sick or not sick or concussed or not concussed.
Yeah, and it is private information. Yeah. It's just like healthcare information. It's private, right? Like we'll let him heal and hopefully he's stabilized and he's doing well. That's what we can hope for him as a human. Yeah.
And then in amateur sports, building up to the NHL, I think one of the things that I really appreciated about the way you dealt with the players when I was observing, and that's all I could do because when I wasn't on the air, we really had nothing to do. But there was a connection between you and the players. Like these guys would have to, they're hurting, first of all, and a lot of athletes don't like to admit that they're really hurting. So they want to put on the brave face. But when they were in our surrounding, because you and I were sharing space, they could be hurt and they could have a safe place to feel their injuries and to work through their injuries. And I think I'm safe in saying that it's at the younger age that we have to start telling athletes that it's really okay to take care of themselves. Self-care is really important, and that's what will give you a long career in the sports world.
And I think there's been a shift 100% in the general sense of, you've got hockey kids doing yoga, you've got them eating protein shakes and they're eating well. And, like in the NHL, they used to or many of the pro sports, they used to smoke in the intermissions or, have a beer after the game. That doesn't really happen anymore. And especially in the younger ages, there really are more accepting of self-care because what we're trying to do as practitioners is teach them how to be a human, how to be an adult that happens to excel in sport. They have to go together. And I think that seems to be where most practitioners are going and most athletic therapists when they're working with their teams is that we have to put them as a human first and see them as the athlete second.
Well, it's a great way to be. I remember you making those protein shakes or whatever they were after the game, but you were one of the only ones who was doing that. I mean, you were cutting edge at the time.
That's my personal training background.
Well, it made a huge difference. They're not getting off the ice, having a shower, getting on a bus and shoving down 6 pieces of pizza.
Yeah. And I think the kids more as they're coming through the systems are ready for it. It's no longer weird or voodoo or anything like that. It's much more mainstream, I would say. And the same with the concussions too. I think the kids know, I think everyone has an idea now of the worst things that can happen with concussion. And I find when they are symptomatic, it's easy to keep them out. The hardest part I find is when they're no longer symptomatic and we're still working through the progressive build, then it gets harder because now when you have a sprained ankle and it's starting to feel good and you think, oh yeah, I can just go for that run or play that basketball game and I'll just tape it and I'm fine. Well, the brain doesn't work that way. So that's I find is we still have to go over the hurdle of that, of getting through the end stage of concussion rehab.
Right. And I've heard some recent studies about pain in terms of if you do have that sprained ankle, a year from now, if you're still feeling pain, it's your brain actually protecting the ankle that is completely fine, but you got to let the brain know that it's fine. That kind of thing. And I think it's the same with concussion somehow. You have to
There's university courses and degrees on the psychology of injury.
Really? Well, yeah, I imagine.
And you can get into complex pain syndromes and pain behavior and, you're used to limping, so you keep limping. Or someone who identifies as someone who has a concussion, that might be hard to get out of that identification. Or someone who's always injured, that becomes their persona. And that's hard to change. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know a kid who fell at camp, and she took some allergy medication, so they made her stay in the infirmary overnight, but she was the only one there. She got up in the middle of the night, went to the bathroom, and she was dizzy from the Benadryl or whatever they'd given her. And she fell and she hit her face on the side of the sink and broke her nose. And all the emphasis and attention was on the nose. It looks bad. It hurts like hell. Her eyes were black. Her mother was totally freaked out, because no one wants to see their kid looking like that. So she was in the hospital for over a week before they realized that she had suffered a major concussion from hitting her head so hard. And I heard recently that 8 years on now, and she still is suffering from that concussion.
Yeah, it's too bad.
And I think that's a real shame. And I'm not sure it's because it was diagnosed late so much as maybe it wasn't handled properly.
They're so complex, though. You can handle something perfectly and still, we don't know. We know lots about concussions, but we still don't know lots. Like, we don't know everything about the brain either, a healthy brain. Yeah. Never mind one that's potentially has an injury to it. The research is going into how can we help some of these people who just don't recover. What more could have been done, or maybe everything was done well. It's so hard to say. So hard to place that onto someone and say you didn't do enough.
Right. Or on the other hand, it's so hard, it's equally hard to say to the person suffering, well, look, you should be over this by now, so let's get over it.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why something, to say, like, when someone does have a concussion, sometimes the worst thing to say to them is like, when are you going to come back? Because they don't know. It's a really hard question. And coaches say it all the time. When are you back? When are you back? And there's really no answer most of the time.
Yeah. And with a break, it's like, okay, 6 to 8 weeks cast, then you got your rehab. So you can really come up with a plan of, 12 weeks from now, they'll be back on the ice and they should be doing okay. But you can't do that with concussion, can you?
No, because you can have a low-grade headache, as your example, for a long time. You can be someone who's lost consciousness, throwing up, has major symptoms, and recovers in 10 days.
Wow.
That's why we have to go, that's why, having, not that I'm biased, but having an athletic therapist on site, but having someone there to really go through what the symptoms are so that those symptoms can be handled appropriately, and at least you're started on the right path. To either help with the fear of what's going on, or to get into the right practitioners, or, get the proper rest and rehab and to go from there.
So if a parent is concerned because their kid's playing soccer and they have an incident that happens in the soccer pitch, what are they looking for signs of concussion?
So the big, what we call them red flags. So throwing up, a worsening headache, maybe they come to the pitch and they get to the car and their headache, they get home, the headache is worse. Those are go to the hospital. Loss of consciousness, go to the hospital. Anything that's major, like a big body reaction, you have to go to the hospital because they have to check and see if there's something worse going on, right? Is there a skull fracture? Is there a neck injury? Is there something that's worse, right? If they can decide that, okay, it's a mild brain injury, sport-related injury, you go down that path, but you have to take them to the hospital. If they just don't feel well, maybe they don't seem like themselves, they're a little more irritable, mild headache maybe. A lot of times it's the vision and they just don't feel right. They seem slower. That's I know it's a weird way to describe it, but you have an athlete, you get used to seeing it, and they just seem, I don't want to say they're not depressed, but their movement and their attitude is depressed because they're not sharp. And then as they get better, you start to see, oh, there you are. It's almost like you can just see they're brighten up and they're just back to their normal selves, maybe joking around and sharp-witted maybe, but the biggest things is that they're different.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the subtle things. Yeah.
Those are the subtle things. And because I remember one of the players, I actually said it on air, and I used to get in trouble for commenting on their injuries because I don't like the fighting and stuff in hockey. And this particular kid, who now plays in the NHL, by the way, I saw him, he was unconscious before he hit the ice. Everyone said, oh,
Right.
he hit his head on the ice. And no, he didn't. He got clocked before he hit the ice. He was unconscious before he hit the ice. And of course, unconscious, we're right on that. Everybody is right on that. And I'm the first one on the air saying, I can't believe this is allowed in hockey. Anyway, but it's the less enormous, I guess, is what we were talking about at first.
So much harder.
That
it's easy to see if someone is stumbling around, someone has a big headache, or they throw up. Those are easy to see and should go to the hospital. It's the little things of like really recognizing when someone is not themselves. Are they doing logical things? So when we ask them, to repeat numbers backwards and to, now we do complex tasks. Can you walk with one foot in front of the other, which is called tandem, like, heel to toe.
Right, walking in the line kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. While counting backwards by sevens. Those are one of the things we test for. Can you do complex cognitive work and move at the same time?
I wouldn't have been able to do that one without a concussion.
But you could, and everyone says that, but you could work it out. You might pause, you might logically think it through, you might count out loud, someone who's really had difficulty might sit out numbers that don't make any sense. Or they just break down. I can't even fathom that. It hurts to think about sevens and, there's a big difference. So we're looking for the process and how you can get through it. Not everyone's very good at math. Not everyone's very good at numbers. But how's the process?
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Same with balance. Someone might not have very good balance. So they might say, oh, you're testing my balance, but I don't have good balance, they'll tell me. You're looking for gross errors so that the brain obviously has no idea where you are in space and time. So it's not just can't stand on one foot, but are you making really gross errors? Are you making big movements, big corrections, that kind of stuff, or not correcting at all?
So, Jen, what are you doing in the sports world right now?
Now I'm working with the King Rebellion, which is also in the OJHL. That's a new team as of last year, so we're going into our second season. So I'm there with them as the head therapist. And
where are they?
They're in King City.
Oh, King City, okay.
Yeah, right where Seneca College is.
Nice.
There's a new arena, and it's on the Seneca property.
So you're working with a hockey team and?
Yeah, and I also, I'm just finishing up working with, we have a committee, it's a trainers committee for the Ontario Hockey Association. So it's a group of us therapists that are in the junior A and junior C in Ontario. So, sorry, I shouldn't say junior and senior. So junior A, junior B, junior C, and senior A. Mm-hmm. So we meet once a month and we're looking to elevate the trainers that are on the benches around Ontario. So level up in terms of first aid, emergency action plans, the standards of care, in hopes that, eventually you start to roll from one team or one league to another, and you would expect a certain level of care. From an emergency standpoint. So that was our sort of mandate, having more communication with the refs. So when we're on the ice, making sure that everybody can act accordingly and there's not just one person there trying to do all of it. So what's the role of the ref? Having another person there, someone else knows the emergency plan. And that would be the same for all the junior and senior teams around Ontario.
Wow, that sounds like a really good initiative. Yeah,
and it's really neat to see how receptive everybody really has been. So when I first started at Stouffville in like 13, 14, 15 years ago, nobody was talking about emergency action plans. We had one, but it really wasn't talked about. Now we have a mandate to meet with the other therapist or the other trainer before the game and just, hey, how are you? Zamboni's going to come in from over there. Anything going to change with our emergency plan? My hand's going to go up. I need you to come out, grab that towel or that bag, and everything is all set. So all before the games, everybody knows what their role is. And so that's been a really big shift, and it's really nice to see.
Wow. That sounds great. Sounds great. And it must be really worthwhile for you.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off a little bit because you know someone's going to be there to back you up.
Right.
Because sometimes there's injuries where you need 4 hands.
Absolutely.
2 hands aren't going to cut it.
Yeah. And you and I have seen them all.
Yeah. So we have a committee with the OJHL now. So a group of trainers that are looking to elevate even higher, maybe than the OHA, so that there's cohesiveness amongst the trainers. We all know who each other are. Emergency action plans, emphasis on the warm-ups and the nutrition and things like that, that we're elevating ourselves, educating ourselves, maybe having meet and greets and continuing education within the league. So those have been really fun projects in the last little while.
Well, that sounds great. Well, it's been fabulous catching up with you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Fresh Waves. We really appreciate your time. And good luck in all that you do, and thank you for the information about concussion. It's very useful information for everybody in this planet, not just sports fanatics and athletes in general.
Yeah, I so much passion about them because they're so misunderstood, and it's so nice that you would want to reach out to a practitioner to talk about them in real terms.
That's exactly what we were looking for, because you can talk what if, until you're green. And it's nice to speak to somebody who really knows what the current protocol is, because my protocol is even back to the Stouffville Spirit days when my daughter got hit in the head with a puck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what I was told then, but things change, it seems like, on a yearly basis.
They meet every 2 years, and all the smartest people in the world meet, and they go through all the current research. They go through all the things that we've been doing, what's working and what's not working. Like it is changing so quickly. So if we can just keep up with what's been working, I think our athletes are getting better as a result.
Terrific. Well, thanks again for joining us, Jen. If anyone wants more information about concussions, where can they get some more information?
A really great general resource is Parachute. You could just Google Parachute concussion, parachute.com. It has a lot of great safety things, so you have to kind of find the concussion part. But it has the return to sport protocols. It has red flags. It has what to look for. It's great advice for pediatrics. It's a really good resource. And it's Canadian.
Great. Even better. And if anyone wants to hear the information that we've shared on this show again, because sometimes we need to hear it more than once, or you missed part of it for whatever reason, you can go to our YouTube channel, Fresh Waves Radio. While you're there, hit subscribe, and then you have access to all the Fresh Waves podcasts and broadcasts. But this one in particular, maybe it's one that you want to save and go back to in case you ever need it. So thanks again, Jen. We've really appreciated your information, but we have to take a break here on Fresh Waves. We will be right back, so stay tuned. Hi, this is Bren Masson. We're back on Fresh Waves, and joining us now we have Chris Mayberry. Chris, nice to have you back on Fresh Waves.
Oh, great to be back with you, Bren, and it's been a while, and I hope you're well, and getting excited for the Stanley Cup playoffs as they move along.
Oh, I am indeed. Now, I used to work on the broadcast team for the Stouffville Spirit, and you are now doing play-by-play on that said broadcast team. It's all new players now on the ice and new players in the Whistle FM bench. So the last time you and I spoke, Chris, we were talking about Olympics and Olympic sport and Olympic broadcasting and the adventures that you've had in your journeys that way. Tell us a little bit about your hockey journey. You also have a broadcast hockey journey that started long before you ever came on at Whistle FM.
Oh, yeah. It basically, in terms of doing play-by-play, when I got to Ottawa, I worked for 4 or 5 years back in the 1970s in London, which is my hometown. And I got a chance to go to Ottawa, and I did the Ottawa 67s for 3 seasons. Our station got the rights, and they tabbed me to do the games, which surprised me a little bit because the sports director, my boss, had done WHA games in Ottawa, but he had 2 young kids. He didn't want to take the bus trips everywhere, and so he said, if you can do it, it's yours. And so I did that, and I never had more fun in my life doing anything in radio than hockey play-by-play. It was great fun. Eventually that gig ended, and I came to Toronto, worked as a radio morning sports guy, morning team guy for 7 years at CKEY. And then I got the chance to go to Broadcast News and head up their sports department, which is a division of the Canadian Press. And that allowed me to travel all over the world for various events like like the Olympics and, Stanley Cups and Grey Cups and all kinds of things like that, baseball playoffs. And so I finally retired about 9 years ago. And a couple of times, Whistle and the Spirit approached me to do volunteer play-by-play. And I did this past season and had a great time. Great kids, great broadcast team, great support from the team, and it was great fun. Looking forward to it again next year.
Perfect. So earlier in the show, we were talking with Jen Mark about concussion, and I think it's really appropriate to bring it up at this time because of what's going on with Stolarz. Now, that's the goalie for the Toronto Maple Leafs, if anyone was not able to watch the game and has no idea what's going on in the hockey world. The Leafs are in the second round of the playoffs, and I think it's interesting that, I remember years ago where the teams would discuss at length what was going on with somebody. Oh yeah, they've got a broken leg and it's going to be 6 weeks in a cast, and then they'll be rehabbed and then they'll come back. And there was a real formula for when a player would be back based on the injury that they have. And now that seems to be a thing of the past. You hear phrases like upper body injury. Well, I don't know. What's an upper body injury? Anything above the belly button? What's a lower body injury? It could be below your armpits or it could be below your neck. They're so vague, and it annoys me a little bit because I think if there is a real concussion, then and a player takes the time to get well instead of the old school of play through it, and we value the life of the player and the quality of life of the player. I'm all for that, and I think it bodes well for younger kids looking up to the pros to know that they can, if they go there one day, that they will be taken care of. But I think sometimes I'm out to lunch because people don't think that way.
You're probably right. And you look at the NFL, and we were chatting before we came on that the league has been taking so much grief over the years over retired players not having any decent quality of life because of concussions, and they have stepped up. You see a guy get hurt taking a headshot now, and he's immediately in the tent in concussion protocol, and then if he's out for the game, you likely won't see him for 2 weeks or longer. Depending on the severity of the injury. And people forget that. It's an injury. Mm-hmm. It's an injury to the brain. Gone, and thank goodness, gone are the days of, well, he'll be in the next play because he just had his bell rung. Mm-hmm. When I played high school football, I remember guys getting hit. And, they at most they would miss a series, but they'd be right back in there. Oh, I just got his bell rung. He'll be fine. Yep. If you got a broken arm, fine, you were out. But hits to the head, that was considered no big deal back in the day. And you're right about access to information about injuries. It's been 20 some odd years since I actively covered, say, the Maple Leafs or the Blue Jays or whatever in terms of covering sports in Toronto. We had full access to dressing rooms, locker rooms, clubhouses right after a game. And it was pretty easy to get information within 24 hours as to the severity of somebody's injury. And I'm thinking if you go way back, sports writers like Scott Young, Red Fisher, Frank Orr, who traveled with the teams, loose lips, etc., they would know within a couple of hours as to the severity of someone's injury, But today, no. And you raised a good point off air that a lot of teams are so reluctant, and now every team is so reluctant to disclose that kind of information because they don't want to give the opponents an edge, particularly at playoff time. Yeah. Because I would think the less severe of an injury, it's an upper body injury, but he'll be back for the next game. Well, you don't want to say what that upper body injury is. So, hitting in the playoffs is such an important part of the game. Guys will target that. Exactly. And, so they're being mum about it. And I can see their point. I really can.
Yeah, it protects the players on one hand, but then, there's that it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because the fans, especially the super fans, those people stood out there for that first Leaf game against the Panthers in 11 degrees and pouring rain. The one guy that Sportsnet interviewed him, just those clips from the fans, and he's like, I'm so cold, I can't feel any of my body parts, I'm so cold. That's a fan,
Invite him to Stouffville Arena in the middle of February.
Oh, try Trenton.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the thing. These players are now getting millions and millions and millions of dollars. They have commercials. They have swag. They've got their names and faces on everything. They are literally making millions of dollars. And they have what I would call a celebrity status. So once you have a celebrity status, your life is no longer your own. I think Jen mentioned that, medical records and things are personal and they shouldn't be shared. Well, I don't know if you have the luxury of saying that this is my personal information when I just had to pay $450 for a regular season seat and $1,000 for a playoff ticket, if you can get it for $1,000. Do you not then lose that this is my personal business line?
I don't know because, I always put the health of a player first. And being a fan of professional sports is never about the head. It's always about the heart.
Yeah.
You're buying that ticket because your heart tells you to. You're sitting there, if you're a Blue Jays fan, you're up till 1 a.m. last night watching the game, or the other night watching the game from Los Angeles, or Anaheim, I should say. And because your heart tells you to. Even though, you need an extra cup of coffee the next morning. So, I look at that and I think, it's a business and these guys, sure, they make all kinds of money, but they don't make all that lots and lots. If they invest smart, they're set for life, but they're not making that kind of money at 50.
That's true.
Yeah. And what have they got to look forward to at 50? If you're taking too many shots to the head, then your quality of life is going down. And anything teams can do to protect players in that score, I'm all for. And of course, you and I look at this from a different point of view between the multimillionaires who play in the NHL and junior hockey players who play here in town.
Yes.
It's a whole different ball of wax. I mean, we knew basically not long after the game, because he had surgery the next day, that Evan Breckles had a broken collarbone after game 2 of the series in Trenton. But we couldn't say that on the air.
Yeah.
That was expressed to us off the record, and, he's just out with an injury. Not that he was ever coming back for any game for the rest of this past season, but they just didn't, that's the precedent they set, and I'm fine with that, especially with junior hockey players, because if you get an injury, somebody has a shoulder injury, but he's back in 2 or 3 games, it's the same thing again. Teams are going to target.
Yeah.
And,
he's vulnerable in that left shoulder. Get him on the left shoulder. Get him on the left shoulder.
Exactly.
And, in the NHL, you look at Sidney Crosby, when he came back from his big concussion, he said that there were players gunning for him in the head at every opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, to me, that's awful.
Sure it is. But the NHL, for as long as I've been alive, has always been a league that's had some animals in it.
Well, there's animals specifically on the team, and that's all they do.
Exactly. That's right. And so, if you're a Sidney Crosby, if you're a superstar, you'll know pretty quickly when you get to the league who these guys are.
Oh, yeah.
And, and what teammates will tell you, watch out for 27, because he's the guy that's going to, try and do something, or 18 or 5 or whatever, know.
Yep.
And so, yeah, they're out there, and
but that's the same in the junior leagues. I mean, I've watched the Spirit play in games leading up to the playoffs where Spirit's been ahead by a good number of goals, and then the objective of the other team is we're not going to beat them, but we're going to hurt them.
Yeah.
And that's when I feel like saying, and I've seen coaches do it, pull him off, get him off because you need him for the next series and he's going to get destroyed. And I was at a game where Kristen Finch was targeted and he ended up having a concussion and had to sit out the Dudley Hewitt Cup. And for a kid who had played his whole life and that was his last year, and to have to sit out the tournament of the year, the tournament of a lifetime perhaps, it was so sad to see him. So
that
sad.
was heartbreaking. I remember that season, and for sure. And,
but I also watched him. I watched him stand up from his seat in the arena. No one knew where he was going, but neither did he.
Wow!
So there was a good reason why he was off the ice.
Yeah,
and
and this is it. I mean, that's the thing about concussions. It's not like a broken arm, where the arm will heal and it'll be every bit as strong as it was before the injury. Concussions have a way, brain injuries have a way of never completely healing, depending on the severity of the concussion. And if you get a guy who's had a number of concussions over the years, sometimes they're just never the same. They're never the same player, and they're never the same person. And even if they never take another shot to the head, this will manifest itself and show up many years down the road. Yeah. You don't want to wish that on anybody. That's horrible.
No. And it's a shame, because I think as long as, I know I'm very unpopular when I say this, as long as hockey remains as violent as it is, it will always have the big injuries. I mean, I watch Olympic hockey and I am thoroughly entertained. The only flight in history that's ever been delayed on Air Canada because the passengers wouldn't get on was an Olympic hockey game. Everybody's standing in the lobby watching the game, Canada versus the U.S., and no one would get on the plane. And I don't blame them. But
funny.
That's one of those things where I'm entertained by that hockey. Why can't that be the hockey that we see all the time? When they have those massive hits, there was one in the last game with the Panthers that honestly shook me to the core. It was like, oh, God, that was a horrible. And it was, when it's not against the boards, a mid-ice collision can be even worse. And when someone's not looking.
Remember the one on Eric Lindros? Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Those are just the ones.
Scott Stevens and Eric Lindros, I still shudder when I see that collision.
Yeah.
It's just, and that was how many years ago now? I mean, it's just a long, long time ago. But that's, people who run the NHL and that, they think that sells.
Yep.
The absolute skill of the game is part of it, but, you gotta take a guy. Fighting is, large part has disappeared from hockey. And, in its place sometimes is a lot worse, in terms of stick work and, a lot heavier hits. And, so is it better? Who's to say? And, and it's a different type of hockey. It's almost like two different sports in many ways. Yeah.
Well, I talked to a kid who was playing Junior C, and I said, Junior C, that's great hockey. And he said, yeah, it's the short guys league. If you put us into Junior B, we're just at elbow height for every player on the ice.
That's funny.
Was so funny. We're the short guys league. I'm sure there's some Junior great. C families listening right now saying, that's not true. I just think when you're shorter on the ice, you skate faster and harder because you have to.
Yeah, that's right. You got to make your mark somehow, and be fast and speedy and have skills. The Spirit this past season had a couple of guys who weren't very big, but man, were they skillful. Great with the puck and fast. And to me, it was no surprise that they were, I think, second in the league, maybe third by the time they ended, but they led for a long time in the number of shorthanded goals they had. Because they would put these speedy guys out there. Next thing you know, the puck's going down the end back the other way on a 2-on-1, and they've got a shorthanded goal, it was great to watch.
Yeah, I did a lot of interviewing when I was doing color, and I would interview the players between the periods, and I would interview at the Dudley Hewitt Cup. I got to interview the head ref of refereeing for the Junior B League, and really interesting things from them that I got about what's going on. And especially in Junior B, you're not necessarily grooming a player for the NHL, but you are grooming them for a Division A scholarship somewhere in the States.
Yes.
That's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially $500,000 if they're staying for 5 years. And I remember off air speaking with one of the scouts, and I said, I really don't like this showcase that happens every year because there's so many injuries because the players are trying to impress you guys. And do we put player safety first? I mean, there was a huge mid-ice collision, and because both players had their heads down, both coaches yelled at the same time, "Look out!" And they just full out hit each other, and the one guy was in convulsions on the ice. And
oh dear!
Even from other teams that weren't playing, all of the staff were out trying to help this kid, and the ambulance was on the ice and stuff like this. It was horrible. You could hear a pin drop in that arena. It was awful.
Sure.
But one of the things that he told me was, we're about to spend $400,000 US on a player, and I need to know that they can skate, they can hit, and they know the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, we don't have any room on the Division A teams to start training guys. If they can't skate, they don't get the scholarship. If they can't hit, they don't get the scholarship. If a goalie can't get behind the net and make a defensive play, they don't get the scholarship. And it's really cut and dry. So these kids are really going all out to do the best that they can, and that's when the big injuries happen because they're just giving it their all.
And now with the NCAA relaxing the rules, and players can go up and play a few games in the OHL and still be eligible for scholarships. That used to be, as soon as you played in the the step up, that was it. You couldn't play university hockey in the States. But now that's opening up, and so the competition is even keener.
Yeah, and it's weird because when you think about that scenario, I heard a lot of people say over the years, well, you got to survive the OJHL in order to get into your university. Then you can kind of kick back a bit, but you have to survive those years. And I thought, what a horrible way to look at it. But it's true.
It is true. Yeah, no question. It's, the league of choice is quite the development league. And you got to be not only hockey ready, you have to have the maturity of an adult before they'll accept you in any college program in the States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we had a couple of Spirit, one in particular that went to Division A, but it was in the southern U.S. somewhere. And within 4 months, he was back home. He just wasn't ready. He just wasn't ready. And the next year, he was ready and he did great. But it took a lot of pressure on the scouts from that university to say, look, things have changed. Things have changed. You have to know that a year when they're 18 is a lot of time. They're physically bigger, they're heavier, they're a little bit more mature, and they know what to expect.
In many cases, exactly. In many cases, a lot more mature. It's just amazing sometimes when you look at kids and you see their sort of maturity growth pattern up till a certain age, and then just like their bodies take off, their mind takes off, and their responsibility takes off, and they become adults overnight, and it's remarkable to see.
Mm-hmm. And if we pull that maturity back to concussion and injury like that, then we hope that what we're training them to do is to be able to take care of themselves and to love themselves enough to know that there is a tomorrow and that they can't just play for today. They've got to be thinking about tomorrow. They've got to think down the line and quality of life and all those things, and that it's okay. It's not being a baby or a sissy. It's okay to take the time to be well.
And that's hard when you're that age.
Oh, it is.
Because you've got the competitive gene in you. You just want to do that. And there's peer pressure too. Not just from teammates who might understand it a bit more, but, from your peers in school and whatnot. And, how come you weren't playing last night? And, what's the matter with you? So the peer pressure is incredible, and, hats off to the ones who can see that and take the long game approach to life, good on them.
Good on Sidney Crosby. I think he really did set the benchmark a little higher with his attitude towards his own concussion, and he took his time and came back when he was ready. And then when he got on the ice and a few weeks later and realized that okay, not ready yet, got to go and sit down for a bit more. That's fine. Yeah,
and what a great guy. And it just he got it. He got it early. He was groomed for stardom right out of the gate. Never let it affect him ego-wise or anything like that. He's just a wonderful guy, and you're so right as to how he took his professional approach when he got hurt.
Well, what about Stolarz? I hope he comes back only when he's ready to come back. He's had a few injuries in the last year, and he's come back really well from those injuries. And I just hope that he doesn't come back too soon. But my other side of, the yin and yang says, golly, do we need him?
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's, and who knows, maybe Joseph Woll will stand up and be a Wall, he's got the talent, and, he can steal a series, but he can be a little inconsistent at times.
That's what I was just going to say.
And that's the scary part. Yeah. So who knows what you're going to get? Yeah. And of course you want to see Stolarz back as soon as possible. But,
he's such a big presence on the ice. Physically, he's huge. You just got to call him on the refrigerator or the bus or something. At 6'7", 243 pounds, good Lord, that's a huge human being.
He's a large lad, that's for sure.
And that's why he plays that net so well when he comes out so far, because he cuts down the angle because he takes up so much space.
Yeah, they got nothing to shoot at. The only way they're going to score on him is if he's way back in his net.
Yep.
And that Florida knows that. That's their plan to
get him back
when he gets to the edge. Yeah, exactly. When he gets to the edge of the crease or beyond, give him that shot, and that's their game. And the hockey fan in me wants to see him back as soon as possible. If it's weeks, then good for him and good for the Leafs to understand that. And
there's always next year.
Oh. There is, we've never heard that around Toronto before.
Haven't we been saying that since 1968 or something?
67, yes, that's right. 67, yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah, there's always next year.
I'm afraid to tell you, I was alive when they were winning Stanley Cups way back when. And, I was just a little kid when they won 4 in 6 years. And I thought, this gravy train's going to last forever.
Yeah.
Not so much.
No, not so much. Oh, well, I hope I wish them the best, and I wish him the best. And for anybody out there who is suffering from concussion, or thinks that their kid might have a concussion, go to parachute.com. Take a look at their website. They talk about all kinds of injuries, but concussion is talked about a lot, and there's a lot of good recommendations there on that website. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. Always lovely talking to you. And I hope to be at a couple of Spirit games, and if not, I'll be listening to you on the air.
I hope we can get you out there to the arena, Bren, and thanks so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure being on the show with you and just talking with you in general. Please have a wonderful summer.
Well, thanks. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in today. It's always nice to have you on board here on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson, and we'll talk to you again next week on Fresh Waves.